What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tom here with Tom Ria Sports, and I'm joined as always by my good friend, social media coordinator, and editor for Mets Mirais Online, Josh Finkelstein. Josh, how's it going, brother?
How about yourself?
Can't complain. Tuesday, wild week of football this past couple days. Not too much crazy baseball news, but we got some to talk about. Jumping right into it as we always do, no time wasted. So the first thing we wanted to discuss really was the Mets' level of interest with the Japanese sensation Sugano, Tomosaki. I forgot exactly how to
Moyuki.
pronounce it. Tomoyaki, yeah, Sugano. So just kind of tell me a little bit what you know about him and the Mets' interest. Is it real? Is it talk? Like, what do you think so far?
Well, Joel Sherman today actually came out with a report saying that with an executive actually saying that the Mets are at least involved right now, and that they really could see it being a match between the two of them. Sugano, a lot of people think he's the second best pitcher on the market behind Trevor Bauer, which you know, is a big statement. Then again, it is a weak pitching market, so it's a very interesting situation if they want to go that route. I think Sugano would be a very solid decision, and also for Mets fans, really just want to see a move happen already. His posting deadline to actually sign with someone is January 7th, so we will get that news very shortly if it does happen, and the likelihood is we'll know, a little more in advance of the actual signing date. So we'll see. I mean, I think Sugano definitely would be a strong addition to the Mets rotation. It's always risky going through the international market because you don't know how that will translate to the major league level. Just like if you rely on a minor leaguer to pitch at the major league level without having seen them pitch at
Right.
the major league level, it's always a
Is
risk.
is
But
his? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
but Sugano, people are very high on him. It does sound like, and it definitely would be a solid pickup, and it's arguably of a risk than someone like even Jake Odorizzi.
Right.
So
Right.
Sugano, if they can get him, the ceiling is much higher and probably will not cost that much to the point where it probably is worth it.
Right. So, yeah, I was going to ask you. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm curious, just on for starters, what kind of contract is he going to garner? Like, I know obviously with international, it's always different. Is it going to be a situation like we saw with Otani, where it wasn't anything too extravagant, or is it going to be like, remember when the Yankees signed Tanaka? It was what was it, 7 years, 100. It was a substantial amount of money. Do you think it's going to be one of those smaller, lower term contracts, or do you think it's going to be like something that's a major big deal for whatever team signs him?
I think it's somewhere in between there. I don't think it's going to be like the Otani contract that little.
Right.
I think it's closer to Otani than it is to Tanaka. Tanaka's was an 8-year, I believe, $155 million contract. It's not going to come close to that. I think you're looking around, if I had to guess, probably around 4 years between 30 and 45 mil.
Okay. Very doable. Very doable.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So with the Mets, then let's say they do go for him. Where does he slide in there? Is he more of like a 3, a 4, a 5? Like, where do you kind of see him sliding into the rotation?
I think the plan would be that he slides in right behind Stroman. So it would be DeGrom, Stroman, Sugano,
Yeah.
with the hope that Sugano maybe is even more impressive and really takes takes hold of the number 2 spot in the rotation at some point.
Right. Right. So like I'm reading here just because I'm learning about him on the fly, really. I've heard his name. I just haven't looked too much into him. I see he's thrown a lot of innings. Is that something that kind of concerns you as a Mets fan? The fact he's thrown many innings. He's that says over 1,000. Like, does he have like an injury history? Is there any like major concerns that you see with him, or is it more the only concerns are, hey, he's coming from, you know, Japan, he's coming from a different organization? Is that the primary concern, or is there something else there?
I don't really think there's a ton of concern there, to be honest. You know, they there are some doctors that even say the more innings you throw at this point, actually the better because it builds up the arm strength long term. Um, I think it's in this case, it's very indifferent. It's also, he'll be going from 3 days of rest pitching to 4 days of rest. So that could work in a positive and negative direction depending on how he is individually. So I don't think the innings concern is something to really keep in mind that much here at the moment. There's just not a lot of evidence that suggests that he's going to break down from it, and there's not a lot to suggest that either direction, whether pitching on 4 days rest is going to be more difficult than 3 days rest for him.
Is there any other team that you see being like a threat to the Mets, or another team that is just as interested, if not more interested, like the Yankees or a couple other teams here that have Red Sox, Blue Jays seem to be interested in everybody, and the Rangers. Any of those 10 teams you see as serious contenders?
I think the international market is always pretty difficult to gauge who exactly is involved in it. I will say that I do think the Yankees are involved. I would, if I had to guess. Whether they actually go through with it or not is another story, but I do think they probably, given that they need pitching, and Sugano is someone they could potentially get high quality for not a premium price. I have to think they're at least talking about it. That being said, um, I don't know how far they're willing to push the envelope on that. So it remains to be seen what, it's very unclear what type of contract he's commanding currently. So it really would be anyone's guess who has the best shot right now. I I did read something in Joel Sherman's article though that was interesting, and he did say that a big market team is likely to have an advantage over a small market team in this bidding because the Yomiuri Giants, which is the team Sugano played for with
Right.
in Japan, they are like the Yankees of that area.
That's
And
yeah, that's what I
so
heard. That was the one thing I did hear about that.
have to think he likes the spotlight, which would probably put New York as a destination he wants to be. It's just a matter of which New York team he prefers to play for and which one's offering the most money and which one offers the best experience for him.
Right. Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But which is nice, we don't have to wait too long because really in the next 2 weeks, right? Or a little over 2 weeks, we'll know where he's heading by that deadline.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing we were going to discuss really is Sam Fold, new Phillies GM, as well as Dave Dombrowski joining the front office. Just talk a little bit about what that means for Phillies fans and what that means for the organization going forward.
So I think coming into the offseason, we were all under the impression that the Phillies were not going to spend money and that
Right.
they were planning to lose everyone. Dombrowski changes the picture, though.
Right.
Um, his track records has always been spending big money and trading big prospects, which has a very win now attitude and has resulted in World Series victories, but also the organizations he's left went to ruins the second he was gone. And that's mostly
Right.
because the incoming GM was left with nothing and he was fired or left the organization because of the failure to develop a long-standing success.
Right.
And I think I think it increases their chances of bringing back JT Realmuto, which I'm certain Phillies are going to be happy about.
Yeah.
But there also should be some nervousness about what type of farm system they're going to be developing. The good news, I guess, well, the good and bad news is that the Phillies farm system is already one of the weakest in baseball. So there's not much he can trade from it. That being said, it also means he probably will not be able to build it up at all during his time there, if I had to guess.
Right.
Um,
Which
so
isn't a
there,
strength though. Which isn't a strength of his
yeah,
either.
that's not a strength, but
Right.
it also limits the amount of damage that Dombrowski can truly do because he can't actually make it much worse in that
Right.
regard. He just won't improve it.
Right.
And I mean, if you want a win now GM, if you want your best shot of winning a World Series, um, he probably gives you your best shot of being a winner. That being said, I don't I don't think he gives you any sort of long-term success, any and the likelihood is they have a very small window
And
with
and
him in
and
charge.
that window is, I mean, just looking at it from an outside, not a fan at all of, any of those teams, but in the, in the, excuse me, in the in the NL East, but I don't even view them, as a team that can win now anyways, like I don't
Well,
really see them winning a World Series even if they acquire or they bring back Real Muto or, unless they make some crazy splash or something. I look at their roster and I don't see anything that tells me, yeah, this team can go out and win a World Series in that small window that you're talking about. So I guess what I wanted to ask you, because while you're talking about it, while I'm reading on it, I'm just thinking, what does this mean for Girardi? Like he just joined this organization a year ago, already a new GM and president. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying it changed anything drastically, but I just wonder what's going on in his head. I wonder if he's wondering like, every or 1 year in and there's already all this change, and maybe it'll be a good thing. But what do you kind of think is going on in his head? What do you think it means for his future there?
so I do want to touch on something you said quickly with
Yeah, go ahead.
the division and the win now concept. I think that's a very good point in that I still think if you look at that team on paper, at best, they are the third best team in that division.
Yeah,
I would
I
put
agree.
I would put both the Braves and Mets ahead of them. You with the Nationals when it's at its best, they are ahead of them. And based on standings of last year's 60 game short sample size, the Marlins are ahead of them. So
True.
it really, going win now with a team that really is not built to contend right now, it doesn't seem to make sense. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could look at that Phillies bullpen, and there's not a single arm in there that you want. They legitimately do not have any relievers that are worthy of having big outs at the end of a game or in the middle of the game somewhere. That bullpen has to be built from scratch. There are still other concerns throughout the roster. Reese Hoskins certainly has not been as good as they once hoped. Bryce Harper is Bryce Harper. He's a star. That's and proved to be a great signing, as many Mets could have predicted that was going to happen.
Right.
Um, and I mean, they still have Aaron. And if they bring back Real Muto, they'll have him if they do. But there's something missing there.
And I think,
There's
yeah,
a,
I think
there's a
there's a
lot
few things
missing
missing.
there.
Yeah, there's a few things missing, and it is very interesting. It's weird seeing a team go for it when they don't really have anything to go for it with. And so I don't know. We'll see if Dombrowski can work some crazy magic over there. Maybe we don't. Neither of us know a whole lot. No one in the league knows a ton about Sam Fold. I know he's been a new organization for a couple of years, so we'll see. How well he transitions into that position and what they end up doing. And, this is a team that I could see one of two things, come trade deadline. I could see them either being heavy buy now and they make crazy trades and they go for it, or which is probably likely with him there. But if they come out the gate and they're a struggling team and they're already almost, at the bottom of the barrel out of the playoff picture come July, I mean, they could be in full sell mode. We don't know what's going to happen here, but they're definitely a team to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
Um, oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I think the thing with Dombrowski, though, that I think we should be concerned, and if you're a Phillies fan, you should be somewhat concerned about, is yes, you can look at his time with the Boston Red Sox and the then Florida Marlins, and how they both won World Series with him in charge. But if you look at his time with the Detroit Tigers, they were a successful team for many years. They were a good team. They made it to the World Series, but they never won anything.
Right.
And without winning anything, his style of running a team is not worth it, because look at where the Detroit Tigers are now. That is that, and you can say that there were people in between that didn't help make it much better, but they are largely where they are right now because of Dombrowski's failure to create a strong farm system and to maintain the strong farm system while winning. His style of success is is putting all your eggs in one basket. And that's a very dangerous game. It can work sometimes, but I can pretty confidently say the Philadelphia Phillies, whenever his time as president of baseball operations is over, are likely to be left with a barren wasteland of a farm system, and they are likely to struggle for at least 2 to 3 years.
Right. Right. I could that it sounds like something that's probably not gonna work out too well, if we're
Yeah.
being honest. But it
And
can. It can. Look, we've seen crazier things. We've seen crazy, and I'm not gonna say the jury's out. It just again, it just seems weird because their team I don't really view as a win now roster, but they have a win now mindset, and that usually doesn't breed well, at least for the future.
I just wanted to go back because
Yeah,
you
go
mentioned
ahead.
that thing about Girardi.
Oh
I
yeah, go
think
ahead.
Girardi's job currently is safe. The only thing that really becomes questionable with someone like Joe Girardi and that is concerning is when a new front office comes in, the manager becomes very vulnerable if they stay, because if the team doesn't succeed, the manager often gets blamed, and
Right.
the GM and or president of baseball operations will want to bring in their own guy at that point.
Right. Right. And that's yeah, that's kind of what my biggest concern was. That's why I was like, I wonder what's going on in his head because I'm sure he knows that, you know. But all right, let's go on to the next one. Next thing I really want to talk about, and this is something I'm just like, I'm more stunned than anything. You know, I'm really stunned. And I'm trying to look for a good article to pull up here, but I just keep every time I open up a baseball update, it's something about the Cincinnati Reds trading one of their prominent players, and I'm just curious, like why? You know, like have they lost a substantial amount of money where they can't afford any new players or they can't afford to pay these guys or they can't afford to even keep them on their payroll? You know, we hear about Castillo, Sonny Gray. I mean, who knows who else, but so I'm just in your like humble opinion, what do you think the reason is for the full sell mode of the Reds right now?
I think it's financials almost certainly. With the exception of Luis Castillo, I think Castillo is more about if they make these other moves, they're not going to be that good anyways. And given the state of the pitching market this offseason, it's possible someone will make an offer that is phenomenal and could revamp the entire organization very quickly.
Right.
Luis Castillo is one of the best pitchers in the game, coming with I believe 4 years of control, which is really, you know, that can get you a hefty price tag in a trade.
Right.
That is not a cheap deal to make if you're the team getting Castillo. You are ripping from your farm system or from your major league roster to get,
Right.
or a combination of the two to get Castillo. He's the type of pitcher you give up a decent amount for. Sonny Gray and Eugenio Suarez, on the other hand, those two, it's mostly about money. I think Sonny Gray, maybe to a lesser extent, is about money and more. And I think it's a combination with Sonny Gray a little bit because I think it also has to do with the pitching market, and that Sonny Gray, realistically speaking, is probably one of the best options out there on the trade and free agent market total. So I guess they're hoping someone will offer something good enough for Sonny Gray that they can look to their fan base and say that they got a good return while also ridding themselves of a contract that really, truthfully speaking, is very team
Yeah,
friendly.
as I say, it's not a
But
bad deal.
it's not a bad deal, but it has, like, even if it's not a bad deal for him, it's a significant sum of money in their eyes. So they want to rid themselves of it, whether he's worth the money or not.
Right. So then does that mean Moustakis as well? Is that another guy I mean, they just signed him, but is that another guy they might look to move on from?
Would they look to move on from him? Probably. Do I think they really have the ability to move on from him right now?
Right.
Unlikely. They just signed him last offseason. He's not exactly super cheap. I don't think you would get, if you were to be able to move him, you wouldn't get much for him. So it really, Moustakis, it really would not make a lot of sense to
Right.
move because I just don't think you're gonna get what you want in a deal like that.
Right. Right. So that's yeah, it's just kind of sad because, I was so excited about this team, last year and then in the playoffs and obviously, they couldn't score a freaking run. But I just it stinks to see because I do have a good fan base over there and they haven't been really relevant in a long time. And is there a chance that they, they say we can do this, we can figure this out, or you think no matter what they're gonna end up trading a few of these guys and maybe they still compete, but the idea of them going for it isn't going to be on their mind, but if it happens, it happens. You know what I'm saying? Is that more likely?
So I have a couple things to say on that note. For starters, I think yes, it's always possible, but they already traded Raisel Iglesias earlier in the offseason,
Right. I
which
forgot about
was
that. That's
kind
right.
of an indication that they were planning on doing something along these lines to begin with. Um, the the thing that I think is very aggravating that they play in a division that really is pretty bad, truthfully speaking, and yet none of the teams seem to be aggressively trying to win. You see the Cardinals, you see the Cubs and um and the Reds both talking about dumping money this offseason. You see the Cardinals not really talking about spending money. And they let go of Colton Wong. And then you see the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have no way of possibly winning anytime in the next 5 years, probably, because that team is just abysmal in a way that I don't think is imaginable at times. And then you have the Brewers, who will probably not do anything to help themselves, but probably won't do much to hurt themselves. But nonetheless, they will have a shot at winning that division despite being a pretty mediocre team overall,
Right.
only because the rest of that division is kind of a train wreck. So you're looking at the winner of that division probably winning about 85 games in a regular season of a regular 162 game season.
Wow, that little?
Uh, that's the type of talent that's really in that division at this point. The only team that could exceed that expectation in my eyes is probably the Cardinals.
Well, that's the thing I want. Sorry about that. So that's the thing I wanted to mention about the Cardinals is I know they're, they're just a team that's almost. I never count them out, right? And I think that's what you're doing here. Is you're look. We know they're well built. We know they're well rounded. We know they develop players as good as anybody. So that's why I was surprised when you said 85 because I could see them pulling out 90 something, but I look over your. I mean, now I'm thinking about the Cubs. I don't expect much from the Cubs. The Pirates. We don't get me started on the Pirates. I'm trying to think of who else is in that division. We have the Brewers, right? Brewers are in that division. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't. There's not much expectations there either. Especially looking at the Brewers. If Yelich's downfall continues, they're in deep doo doo. I don't want to curse, but they're in deep trouble if that's the case. I don't think it is. I'm not panicking. I'm definitely not saying it is, but that's definitely out there. But yeah, I'd have to say going into it, I definitely see the Cardinals winning division and yeah, around roughly 90 games makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Yelich will be fine. It's a 60 game season sample. A lot of players struggled in that span.
Right.
Um, that being said, even with a good Yelich, they're not that great,
Right.
and none of the teams in that division are really great. I don't think even if the Cardinals were to win 90 games, you know how those 90 games would be accomplished? By beating up on the rest of their division. That is probably I'll say this too. If the if the Cardinals win 90 plus games, it probably means that every other team in that division finished either finished below 500 or one team maybe squeaked out over 500 outside of the Cardinals.
Yeah. 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 Not looking good for the NL Central to say the least. Let's move on. Next thing I want to talk about is Arenado with the Mets. So still obviously just rumors at this point, but definitely a possibility. I mean, it makes a ton of sense for him to be there. It just depends on what it's going to cost and how it works out. So what do you know about that situation so far and the likelihood of it? Just all the information you have as far as Arenado and the Mets.
So, the most I've really heard so far, it really is mostly noise at this point.
Right.
The Mets and Rockies have talked. It's certainly not the Mets' priority. George Springer is the Mets' priority, according to Morosi, which makes perfect sense. I think there is a match there, possibly, but only if the Rockies are willing to take back significant salary. And to me, it only makes sense if that significant salary is Robinson Cano. Because if it's not Cano, then I don't think you could justify having Arenado and Cano on your payroll next season when you still have Jeff McNeil. That does not make a lot of sense.
No.
And so,
So
and on top of it, the deal would essentially have to be a salary dump because
right.
I don't see how the Mets could really give up a significant prospect package for someone like Arenado, whose contract is poorly structured to the point where in 2023, I believe, his salary is going to go up to $35 million a season for like 4 straight seasons in the middle of the contract towards the back end, which it's likely to result in him not performing during that. Well, it won't result in it, but he will not be as productive by that point. So you'll be paying him a lot of money in his mid 30s seasons, which is not ideal.
Right. So that's what my next question was going to be. You kind of answered it, but a type of trade for him, what is that going to look like? You said Cano is probably going to have to be a part of that. And then it's more of a salary dump sell, but I'm sure they're still going to have to include at least a prospect or two. Is there anybody that either A, you would prefer to see go over somebody else, or B, that is just probably going to have to be a part of it regardless?
I think you're looking at a package. If you were to do the Cano Arenado style deal, that you'd probably be sending away Brandon Nimmo or Dom Smith,
Smith's
plus
tough, but it makes
plus
sense.
a prospect maybe in the Brett Batty territory, or Mauricio, and then you probably then if they are somehow able to get both of those, it's possible the Mets even include another salary, but one that is expiring after like the season or the season after, as compared to Cano, who would be on the books for actually only 2 more seasons after this one. So I mean that
It's not the
they
worst,
it's
it's
not
not the,
well,
especially
he
for
won't. The thing is that's good is he won't be on the books this season. He
right,
only because he was suspended for the entirety of it. So he so you really only have to pay for 2 seasons of him if you're the Colorado Rockies. So there is a match there. It's just a matter of, do the Mets really want to pursue it? And is it going to be enough of a steal in terms of prospect package that you can justify pulling from the farm system a little more?
right,
Because I don't think Arenado is the type of deal that you can give up, 2 of your top 6 prospects for and be content with that.
right.
At most, you debate giving up 1.
And the cores effect is not a concern at all. I mean, me personally, I'm not too concerned by it. Maybe his numbers will dip a little bit. I'm just curious if there's any rumblings or anything that you thought that made it more of a concern.
I'm sure it's slight, but I think one thing that we continue to forget about players, about the Coors Field effect that we have labeled it.
Right.
A lot of players in general play better in their home ballpark. It's likely Arenado will regress slightly from his Coors Field numbers,
Yeah.
but almost every player does better at their home ballpark. So I don't like when we sit there and say, "Oh, well, Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado, uh, their OPS is 200 points higher than it would be anywhere else." I think it's more somewhere between 0 to 100 points of a difference.
Right.
It's not to the point where Nolan Arenado is going to go from being a top 5 third baseman at his best to being a mediocre third baseman.
Exactly, exactly. No, that's why I said I'm not really concerned. And I think for the Mets, they shouldn't be concerned because they don't need him to be a 50 homer guy. If he is, that's great, but the Mets have a good lineup as is. You have a solid lineup. You just need someone who's going to play, good third base. He's going to play elite third base defense. He's going to hit in the middle of the lineup. He'll hit for average. He'll hit for power. Like, that's all you're asking for. And obviously, you're paying him to be elite, and that's what you hope to get out of him. But you can still win if he's, if he bats 285 with 30 homers and 95 RBIs. That's a great addition. He doesn't have to come in and hit 315 with 47 homers and 120 RBIs. If you get that, phenomenal, but it's not what you necessarily need. It's not a team that might acquire him, maybe like, I don't know, like the Diamondbacks or another lower end team that needs him to be a superstar. We need you to do this. So I don't think that's really a concern for the Mets at all. Honestly, I think it's definitely worth the risk. It just comes at what's the asking price going to be? What's the give up going to be? So we'll have to wait and see. But moving along, um, maybe the biggest fish of the offseason, we've talked about him every show and probably will continue to do so until he signs somewhere, is LeMahieu and his update. So anything new? I read that we talked about it a little bit before, but I read that he was looking for 5 years, 125, and the Yankees were not interested in that at all. So, I'm sure you've heard some stuff too. What's your thoughts right now? What's the update with him?
So, Jeff Passan of ESPN released an article yesterday that said that the Mets and Blue Jays are two teams that are still in on LeMahieu, along with the Yankees. A report earlier that week also had said that, I should say last week, that LeMahieu and the Blue Jays was picking up, like there's some momentum if the Yankees were to not be able to get a deal done. The Blue Jays are lurking. They are a significant threat to the Yankees. And truly speaking, as much as I would love to see DJ LeMahieu in blue and orange, although not so certain I love it on a 5-year deal, but that's another discussion.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I think the Blue Jays are the team that will get LeMahieu ultimately,
Wow.
and I think, and we talked about this before the show, and we'll talk about it in a little bit as well when we get onto him. But if the reports are true that George Springer is down to a 2-team race of the Blue Jays and the Mets, the way I see that unfolding is the Mets get George Springer and the Blue Jays redirect the cash at DJ LeMahieu, and the Yankees get put on the spot to decide if they'll do the 5-year deal or not. And the likelihood is they'll say no.
Right. And it's crazy you say that because the way I look at it is, if that doesn't happen, then what's to say the other side doesn't happen, right? Where the other, you said, if the Mets get Springer and then the Blue Jays redirect their cash, or if the Blue Jays get Springer and then the Mets redirect their cash, right? You discussed that before the show. We talked about it, and I've been thinking a lot about it because it makes a ton of sense. And those are two teams that I think are a little more willing to spend the money than the Yankees are at this point, which, again, is still weird saying as a fan my whole life, but it's true. I don't think the Yankees really have any interest in putting up that amount of money for LeMahieu. And they have other options, as we talked about. And I want to mention real quick, because you wanted to talk about it too, was Didi Gregorius, right? Like, he's going to be there's a lot of guys that are going to wait around and see what happens with LeMahieu and the other bigger names. But, he's a guy that makes a lot of sense, again, for the Yankees. What have you heard with him as far as that?
Well, there was an article published by the New York Post saying that he would be interested in a reunion. and but right now he is kind of uncertain about if that will actually be possible. Obviously if LeMahieu comes back, I think as much as we talked about the scenario that it makes sense to trade Voit, they are not going to do it. Cashman has been on the record saying that the plan would be to keep LeMahieu at second base. I think you made a very interesting point, though, with regards to the LeMahieu thing, that even if the Blue Jays were to be the ones to nab Springer, the Mets want a right-handed bat. If they lose out on Springer, there's a very decent shot they would redirect the cash at LeMahieu if he's still out there. And if they don't do that, then you start looking into the Arenado, Lindor situations.
Right.
But I mean, likelihood is the Mets are going to be a team that looks into almost every avenue and looks under every rock. The Mets are going to be in on everyone. And from my site from Metsmerized, Michael Mayer of that site actually talked about yesterday that the biggest thing he heard from Passan in that article, talking about how the Mets and Blue Jays were both in on LeMahieu and they're both the finalists for Springer, it appears. The Mets and Blue Jays are the two teams that are in on everything. They are the two teams that every team is probably fearing they will lose their player to right now.
Right.
And so having both of them involved in LeMahieu is not a good sign for the Yankees. Whether they get him or not,
Right. Because they're
it
either going to
puts the
overpay
Yankees
or
in a
lose
position
out.
where they are going to spend if
Right.
they want to keep him.
Exactly.
If they don't spend, he will be playing somewhere else next season.
Right. And that's the harsh truth. Real quick, one thing I was going to say, it's funny with the Didi thing, right? Because if the scenario does happen, he leaves and then Didi comes back. Um, first he was there to replace Jeter. Now he's there in a sense to replace LeMahieu. That's a lot of shoes, and he did a good job the first time, but a lot of shoes to fill for him. Big shoes to fill for him. All
Yeah,
right, last thing, and then we'll get going. Springer. You talked a lot about him, but is there anything else you really want to mention in regards to his market? I know, obviously, like you've mentioned, it's pretty much a two-team race right now. Is there anything you want to really mention on him before we sign off?
I think that the Springer market, I think that Jeff Passan and his reports are probably correct at this stage with Springer. I'm sure there's other teams that think they are still involved, but realistically speaking, Springer is going to go to the Blue Jays or the Mets. They're the two teams willing to spend this offseason.
Right.
I know that there are other teams out there that are willing to, but the Mets and Blue Jays are the two teams that have made it abundantly clear to the entire league that they are interested in spending big money this offseason.
Okay, real
And
quick
Springer
then.
is going to choose between one of those two. And
I
I
was gonna
think
say, is there a dark horse though? Like if you just were pulling out of a hat, is there another team that could swoop in and just like surprise everybody? Like, or if like even if it's not likely, is there anybody you view that there still is a small chance?
at the onset of the offseason, this team would not have been viewed as a dark horse. They were viewed actually by some as the favorite, but I think at this stage, the dark horse would be the Boston Red Sox
Wow.
because he is from that area. He's from the Connecticut area. He grew up a Red Sox fan. So I would certainly say there would be a shot that still happens. That being said, I I haven't heard much with Boston in a while connected to Springer, and something tells me George Springer doesn't take them to the next level. It doesn't. George Springer does not make them a playoff team.
No.
They need pitching terribly.
Yeah.
I don't see them spending a lot of resources to bring in George Springer because I think mostly what you'd be doing that for is the Alex Cora George Springer connection and for the fandom aspect of bringing in a hometown kid.
Right. Right. All right. Well, that's everything. As always, I appreciate it. Check out my man Josh at Metsmerized online. If you're a Mets fan or if you're just a baseball fan, check him out. Josh, I appreciate all your insight. A pleasure as always, brother. We will talk soon. Enjoy the holidays if I don't see you.
Yeah. Happy
And
holidays.
I'll be texting you throughout the week, though. We'll see if we get any other crazy news going on in the next week.
It'd be nice to see if we can get some nice Christmas gifts for Mets fans this year.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but we'll be back for more. As always, I appreciate everyone tuning in. And Josh, take care, brother.
Yeah, you too. Great talking to you.
All right, peace.